you here. There you go. As per usual, I'm recording this event so I can share the recording later on. And so, hello everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon to you. Good morning to Mathieu and myself. Good that you made it here to this third webinar in our second webinar series. I'm happy that you're here. And this is a very special day for me. It's a very special day for me because of two reasons. First of all, I have the opportunity of sharing this webinar with my good friend Mathieu Lamole. Matthew, because if it will be easier than Mathieu, these French vowels that sound a bit strange. Matthew has been working with ITC for as long as I have. We started working at ITC within I think the same weekend in the same team, all the way back 15 years ago. Well, it will be 15 years in the summer. And we've been very good friends ever since. We've done a few missions together. We've worked together quite a bit. So yeah, we're very close friends. So it brings me great pleasure to have him on board for this session. But also, and he won't tell you this, but I will, today is his birthday. So we will, at the end of the session, we will sing him the happy birthday, all of us together.
Okay.
Okay, in the meantime, there you go, there's celebratory signs all across. Happy birthday, Matthew.
Everybody. Yeah,
today's topic is going to be standards map and the work ITC has been doing on voluntary standards. And you will, of course, know that voluntary standards are a big topic in today's commercial world, basically because they are the gateway into accessing or not being able to access international markets, particularly developed country markets. And Mathieu has been from the beginning involved with the development of standards map. So I will not take any more time. I will shut up and let him, who is the real star of today, just carry on with the show. So Mathieu, you've got the floor. Before that, remember, please, questions, you can type them on the chat box. I'll be manning the chat box, so I'm here. And Mathieu will let you know whether he will like questions during or after or whatever. So Mathieu, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Miguel, and good day, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to have my birthday with you and to actually spend the time now to drive you through a bit more than 10 years of working experience on sustainability standards and what does that mean? Where do they come from? What do they really mean, and how are the impacts for you specifically from your regions and for exports to not only Europe but also other parts of the world? I mean, sustainability has become a very important topic. And indeed, as Miguel said, when we started at the ITC, it was already a long time ago, about 15 years, more or less, indeed. At that time, 15 years ago, the topic of sustainability standards and sustainable development was a little bit blurry. It was not very much used. And it is only when the United Nations started to, express their sustainable development goals that suddenly sustainability and sustainable development became more of a buzzword. And everyone is trying to use it to justify that they are doing the good things in terms of trade, in terms of policy, in terms of market access, in terms of relations between buyers and sellers. But there is a lot of, let's say, confusion, and there is a lot of, initiatives that claim that they have sustainability components, although they don't really know what they are talking about. So I'm hoping that today in this webinar, I will at least give you some more ideas and concrete elements to navigate what I call a jungle. It's a jungle of initiatives. It's a jungle of requirements. It's a jungle of market access tips, tools, but also obstacles. And you may or you may not want to use private standards. And I think it is important for you, as from the beginning, to really understand that we are not pushing for certification. We are not pushing for you to become organic or fair trade or other types of standards certified, we are there for you to understand if it makes sense or not. And also what are the costs that are involved, and not only the financial costs, but also everything that goes together with a standard. The landscape has changed a lot over the last 10 years. As I said before, 15 years ago, it was just a very blurry concept. Now you can see it in policy frameworks. The European Commission is using it a lot in the new regulations. And that means that from a voluntary nature, I mean, you decide if you want to be organic or fair trade or not. It is becoming more and more a mandatory element in the trade policies and the regulations and the market access regulations. But still, you have let's say, a balance of choices to make when it comes to exporting products. So anyway, that is my short introduction. So indeed, my name is Mathieu. I've been with ITC a bit more than the 10 years, and my background is very much on market access and sustainability. So I have prepared for you today a presentation in PowerPoint, so that I can drive you through some concepts and findings and, you know, explaining the story. After that, I will have a live demonstration of the online tool that every one of you can use. And there is no access fee or anything. I mean, it's a free public good everyone can use. We will make a few exercises and scenarios, and I will show you how it works. And after that, I'd love to have a little debate with you, a little discussion. If you think that was relevant or interesting, or if there are some concepts that you would like to dive into a little bit more and with more granular explanations. So that's a bit the 3 steps of today's webinar. So a presentation, a demonstration, and a little conversation with you. Obviously, if you have any question, as Miguel was saying, use the chat box. I'll be happy to answer them as I read, as I see them coming up, or also if they come to a certain topic, I will park them for the conversation at the end. But if anything is unclear, please raise your hand, chat box, put a message, and I can make a little pause. That being said, let me share my screen with you. I think now you should be able to see it. Perfect. So standards map, making sustainable trade the standard. That's a little bit the new motto that we have at ITC. It's not about just making trade work, but trade that has a sustainable component to it. And maybe just already with that, I want to tell, what is it, sustainable trade? Sustainable in the sense of trade that can continue in the medium and the long term. So not trade that exploits all the natural resources in a first go, trade that has a longer term vision that can contribute to both social and environmental benefits for those who are involved in international trade. What we have at the ITC is basically developed a database of those initiatives and sustainability standards. And this is what I will start with the agenda. So discussing about this database, the standards, the codes of conduct, and how they were emerging, and what is the uptake on the international value chains. The standards map as a global tool is very useful, but it needs some guidance on how to navigate, make the searches, and realize if you have a list of 15 standards for certain crops and products, which would be the best. So I will guide you through the tool, and looking forward, how does that implicate or impact your work? So that will be the last part of the presentation. The mission of ITC, I mean, you've seen that already with Miguel a few times, and all these series of webinars, I think, have made it very clear. ITC is about having good trade. What I'm going to present you is the acceleration of good trade in terms of a sustainability perspective. So from ITC's global vision, which is good trade applied everywhere, we will be using a kind of a surgical approach for sustainability, which means a social approach and an environmental approach to trade. The mission very much is that what we develop as a resource, as a database, as a tool, as a package of advisory services is brought to the MSMEs, the micro, small, medium-sized enterprises with as much knowledge and skills so that companies can take their own decisions. And as business support organizations, this is your mission to also transfer this knowledge and those tools to companies that are applicable and using those tools. So basically, on our side, there is a big component in terms of the transparency on sustainability, which is the neutrality of ITC. I mean, you know that we are an agency of the United Nations, and this places us in a very unique position, a position that is that the neutrality makes it that we will not make any value judgment on a standard saying this is a very good one, this is a bad one, this is a good enterprise, this is a bad enterprise, this is a good business support organization, this is a bad business support organization. We are value judgment free. We just want to help as many enterprises, as many business support organizations as possible. And the neutrality is important in terms of looking at sustainability, because some standards will focus mostly on environmental concerns like biodiversity, waste management, climate action, water management, and other standards will rather focus on human rights, child labor, migrant contracts. And it is not for us to say that one standard operating on biodiversity is better than a standard on child labor. Some standards actually do both, but sometimes there will be differences. And we have the trust of the standards organizations to give us their data, because they know that we will not rank them or put them into a classification order. Rather, we will bring the transparency about all of them. And this in one clear vision, which is the enhancement of the competitiveness of the enterprises. Because the more they know, the more they will be competitive and the more they will be able to access the markets. So all of this to say that the tool and the resources that we have put together are very much for a global reach that everyone can use and enhance their situation. That is very much the strategy that we have developed when working on sustainability. Now I start on the core. What are we talking about with the sustainability standards? If you look at the history, about 30 years ago, 1990 more or less, you have witnessed that there has been a very, very important United Nations conference. It's ended up as being the Rio de Janeiro Declaration. That was in 1991. And this is the first time that this conference exposed the importance of looking at environment issues and development. That was in 1991. At that time, with the conference, all the countries, all the member states, all the representatives committed in doing something for the environment so that we could not just consume as before and pollute the oceans and the planet as it is. There has been a kind of an awakeness of the global community that environment was important. And since then, since 1991, you have seen a tremendous uptake of sustainability initiatives and standards. So you can see this is my first graph on the left hand of the graph of the slide. You have this peak of initiatives that have been developed since the Rio Declaration up until 2015, and now it's the same. It's more or less a plateau. So you have a number of standards that have been developed, and it all started from this awareness and raising awareness that environment needs to be protected. All of these initiatives are very good, very nicely intended. They have good mission, be it, as I was saying, waste, water, climate, biodiversity, wildlife, etc. The problem is there is no framework to determine how to create a standard. So you have private standards and private organizations, civil society organizations that have developed them. Today, there are hundreds of standards, And some of them are very efficient. Some others are less efficient. Some of them really help you access new markets. And some of them are just greenwashing. What is called greenwashing is just a kind of a marketing claim that has no substance. So the problem is to navigate the jungle. The jungle still that is taken up by the market. And this is the right-hand side of my slide here that is showing you some market uptake of certified products. So you could see just between 2008 and 2018, so a trend of 10 years, a decade of implementation of standards, that you could see really the volumes and the importance of standards in certain key commodities: tea, sugarcane, soy, palm oil, cotton, coffee, cocoa, banana. Those are just a snapshot looking at the market uptake. In the early times, of course, in 1991, there was not much market for it. I mean, the standards were just being developed. But more and more in the supermarkets, in the shops, in the where people go and do their purchases, the part of products that come with a sustainability label, it can be a logo on the product, it can be a mission and a claim, it can be a CSR reporting. That part of the products that are associated with a sustainability initiative has grown tremendously. And of course, not in the very beginning, but if you look at it now in 2022, we cannot talk about a niche market anymore. Sustainability has become the new normal. You cannot sell anymore just a product by saying, hey, this is an orange, this is a pear, this is an apple, this is a bean. You need to explain a little bit more about the quality of the product and its origin. Its origin saying also things about the way the product has been produced. Some part of the market still doesn't talk about sustainability, but the trend has accelerated tremendously over the last 10 years. That now it is almost becoming extremely difficult to sell a product without saying anything else than what it is. So you need to say a little bit more about the product, that it is coming from a certain country, a certain region, that it has been produced in a way that protects social and workers' rights, and that protects as well the environment one way or another. And the standards can help. The standards can help make those claims that the products are sold in a sustainable way. So the market is growing, that is a trend. The number of standards has been growing a lot, and now it's more or less what we say plateauing. So it is more or less constant, big number, but constant number. Those are the two lessons from this slide. We did a survey in the European Union about how the market is really transforming and changing. And this is an interesting result as well that I wanted to share with you. So we surveyed big retailers in 5 countries: France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Spain. And in all the countries, more than 90% of the retailers have confirmed that their sustainable products, the part of the shelves of the sustainable products, the products that are associated with a sustainability initiative, has been growing and will continue to increase in the next 5 years. And this is quite important because that means that the market is transforming and growing very fast. And we have just got the confirmation of our market analysis by surveying the key actors, the retailers, the companies that are selling the products, and that confirm that, yes, the sales in the next 5 years will be dramatically different. And this is what you can see on the right hand of the slide. The left hand, and the right hand is showing for different product categories, from beverages to toys, printed materials, mobile phones, the part of normal sales, the growth of the total sales vis-a-vis the growth of the sustainable sales. And in all cases, except for the clothing, and we can come to that example in a bit later, this is an exception, but in all other categories, you have the light blue bar, which is the sustainable sales, that indicates a bigger growth than the normal sales. So when you have a product that is being successful on the market, you may expect a market share that is growing. But when you look at that market share that is growing, inside that, the products that have a sustainability component are growing much quicker than the others. And this is, in some sectors, even more seen. I mean, you can see it even more than in other sectors. I'm taking the example of beverages and food. This comes directly from agriculture. Agriculture and, organic fair trade type coffee, cocoa, palm oil, sugarcane, all of these products that have a sustainability component, they are growing much quicker than the products that just sell from a conventional, traditional perspective. Toys and games is also very much a consumer goods traditional manufacturing plant. And in that sense, also as an effect of the regulations, you have more traceability requested, and facilities, the manufacturers that have to demonstrate no child labor, no forced labor, no discrimination, fair wages being paid, living wages actually being paid, and all of that being certified. So there is a tremendous increase on the consumer goods type categories, but on agriculture, food, and beverages as well. The exception on clothing with a negative sale is quite rare, because in that sense, there has been just recently, in the time of the survey that was just a couple of years ago, a kind of an awareness raising of the hidden part of the iceberg. So obviously people were kind of thinking that by just imposing some new social legislations, that all the garment facilities in, let's say, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, that it would be automatically taken up and then working up. But the thing is, in that sector, the more you dig, the more you realize how difficult it is and how the industry is not so nice. And the amplitude of the challenges has been proven very difficult. And this is why, from what people were thinking, this is the baseline situation and now we have to improve, the more they discovered the problems, the more the normal bar was actually going down, which resulted in almost a negative sales. That being said, the potential for transformation and for improvements of the textiles and the clothing sector is only bigger and bigger. And so there are tons of initiatives now blooming up and implementing initiatives in the textiles and the sector in particular. So that's just a kind of an anecdote. But again, the summary of this slide here, the market is moving, but it is really moving a lot. More than 90% of the retailers, they expect a tremendous increase in the next 5 years of their sustainable products. And this is not nothing. Those are the 5 major products and countries in Europe. And then on the sector side, all the sectors are impacted. Food, beverages, very much, manufacturing as well, and there is even more to come. So that would be a section. Yes, please, you have your hand raised. You're on mute.
Thank you for your explanation. I would like to interest one thing is office and household furniture. The sustainability is a decrease, and today so is an increase. How different? Yeah.
Yes. And this is similar. This is similar situation as what I was explaining before with the textiles and the clothing. So office and household furniture are all these little artifacts, and there is a lot of small objects that are for decoration and that are also just for being used, that are coming from China. And this is where those retailers realized, okay, let's just push the sustainability requirements on them. And they also unveiled a number of issues, especially with migrant workers, that lower down the situation in the bar. So on that side, at the moment, the normal sales are still going up much quicker than the sustainable sales, just because of the problems of really implementing sustainability standards in a sector that is largely driven by China and informal sector within the Chinese market. And that has been the situation. Again, the potential is very high on that to transform and to move.
Oh, okay. I see. Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yes,
thank you. And again, raise your hand, anyone, if you have more questions. I'm happy to clarify things if you see that requires more clarifications. So I was telling in the beginning that the challenge is beyond a good intention of implementing a sustainability standard or an initiative and accessing new markets. There is the question of how do we do it? How to do access markets, how to select initiatives. And that means navigating a jungle where there are claims that are being made by some standards and labels that are not necessarily true, and also realizing that they represent a big investment. So this is where we call it, from ITC's perspective, navigating the jungle. Navigating the jungle because some standards will offer a certificate, but you have to pay for that, of course, but there is a certificate. Some other initiatives will be a code of conduct or an audit protocol or a set of good practices or maybe a guidance. And in terms of adoption of sustainability initiatives, you will need to understand which are the ones that are the most likely to help you and to help your companies and your members directly. So some initiatives only operate in a certain market or in a certain sector, or they only operate when it comes to certification of the grower of, let's say, cotton grower, but not at the manufacturing, transforming sections of the value chain. So some standards apply to primary production, others only apply to retailers and traders. So obviously, not everything is applicable to everyone. And this is complicated, and we try to help you and guide enterprises in the selection of standards. As I was saying, to make this jungle navigable so that people can go through, we had to use this kind of strategic positioning of the ITC with the neutrality of the database and the partnerships that we have with the standards organizations that will work with us. And this is important that you realize that the standards organizations that have been referenced on the standards map tool that I will show you, they work with us. I know them. I mean, they work with me and my team to update their information at least every 2 years, so that we are sure that this is not just a desk research where a group of good colleagues have looked at the internet and put information into buckets. We have directly worked with all the organizations that are referenced so that they have confirmed to us what is it they do, what is it they don't do, what do they require, how much does it cost, and when do they operate verification and certification processes. And this is only thanks to the neutrality of ITC that we were able to manage this collaboration and operate the strategic positioning of the standards map. One thing that springs from the database is a number of applications and tools. And this is where we have been able to work with a few business support organizations directly to customize an analytical framework for their country. So I'm just saying that as an example, and we can discuss later if that would be interesting to some of you, but there is a possibility for ITC to customize portals, web applications, and analysis of standards for certain sectors and for certain types of organizations. And one example here that we have done is with the OECD in Paris. And we have done that already. This is an ongoing project. We have not finished yet, but we are transforming the OECD standards, and they call them guidance for responsible supply chains. We transform that into a lens to assess which standards correspond the best to the OECD, so that they can also identify standards that work for them and that are sufficiently aligned to their own requirements. So this is an example we do with OECD. And there are other examples where we can make a matching between a reality. It can be a business support organization, it can be a policy institution, and relevant standards. Beyond the standards analysis, there is also the possibility to convene technical discussions on sustainability issues, social or environmental. And this example I have on the screen is a roundtable on deforestation-free products. This is linked to both sustainability standards that apply the non-deforestation practices and also policy frameworks, including in the European Commission, that are pushing forward new legislations that promote deforestation-free products. That means addressing deforestation from a legislation perspective. And the question is very much how can that be translated and standards being used to demonstrate when you access the European market, hey, I am compliant with the legislation because I have my standard and my certificate that tells me my product is not linked to deforestation. So again, here, it is not about analyzing a standard, it's about having a roundtable, a technical discussion with people from the Commission and from different countries to discuss the current legislation proposal and how can it be put into practice and implemented in the field. So that's something we do. And the last example I wanted to share as well is those international forums where we have conferences that are usually organized, I mean, especially since the COVID-19 situation, in a hybrid mode. So part of the conferences are in person, but everyone can always attend online. That's the T4SD forum. We have it every year around September, early October. And this is where a lot of learnings can be, shared and discussed. So this is an interesting part as well that ITC is doing. And I would encourage every one of you to keep in touch with the ITC and be able to come and join and contribute actively to those discussions that we have, where there are some different types of activities we do, and with the partners and some European cities and commission. That is the example that we had with the Malmo situation. So just a few projects where we expose again what are the best practices that are taken by European countries. So anyway, that is the end of this first presentation of the work of ITC and sustainability in particular. Multiple partners are working with us. And since the last 15 years, as Miguel was saying, that we've started this work on the database of sustainability standards, now we can see very much the implementation of this knowledge, not only for companies and business support organizations, but also a lot with the policymakers. And this is where new sectors are being explored. Policy legislations are also being explored and mapped in the standards, and even access to finance. Because when companies are developing their business plans and want to export their products, they need credit, they need access to finance, they need access to the banks. And more, the financial institutions are requiring specific sustainability proofs, labels and certificates. And this is important. I wanted to mention as well that for that, we can help companies and BSOs put together a roadmap and looking at how the standards and the certifications for sustainability can match the requirements, not only of the market and the buyers, but also the financial institutions, because those are the people that will help and facilitate the trade overall. Enough of this. Maybe just before I go into the demonstration of the standards map, is there anyone who has a question, or Miguel, is there any comment you would like to make, or an anecdote you'd like more details about?
Well, I'll let the participants come in with any questions they could have. I know that this topic of standards is long, complex, and slightly scary for everyone because it costs money, it costs clients. It's this it feels like this is a developed country problem, and developing countries are just the victims of this issue. So, yeah, if anybody, yeah, Zor, please come.
Yeah, yeah, true. Because one and the Matthias he presenting, we are realize our partner company. So nowadays in our country, many started MSME company and SME company. So last 4 years ago, we encouraged to our partner some other readiness to export, some other preparation. So some of the exporters, now exporter country, they are doing many certificate requirement from their individual country. So they also a lot of investment. So nowadays, so our problem is the logistic cost and production cost is quite high for the current political crisis situation. So we could not sell to the export market. So at the time we are continue to investment to the certificate. And that is the huge issue for our partner. That is a big issue for our partners. So some are given to the organic certificate for their product, because they only focus on the domestic market. Domestic market is still a organic or non-organic conventional product. Never mind, the same. The price is the same. So that's why some of the exporter company give up to the certification process. So that is one of the issue for our country. And now is a certification. Is a how do we continue to be applying for our country. We think about that. Anyway, we learn from this subject continuously. Yeah. Thank you. So this explanation, like an explanation. My question is, this kind of situation, we face the problem. How do we do? How do solution and experience from the other country, similar like our country? So, Matthias, is if you have that experience, please share for us. Thank you. Yeah.
Matthew.
Thank you so much for the question. I would say on our side, in our experience, sustainability is something that makes sense anyway, everywhere in the world, one way or another. It's about safeguarding the rights of the workers and protecting the environment. The market is probably not demanding that sustainability, social and environmental attributes as much in the domestic markets and in the international markets, in developed countries in Europe versus in Asia or in Africa or South America, not at the same level. So this transformation that I was mentioning in Europe is very much happening at the moment. But in the domestic markets, there is an importance to ensure that the workers are paid their fees, that they are actually getting outside of poverty, that the environment is protected so that it can also repercute on the tourism sector and the other types of activities that are very important domestically in every country. Even in a country of crisis, it is important that the people have a salary, that they can live, that they are not stuck in the poverty, and that they can expand and send the children to school, and everything is kind of linked. So one thing is, how can we make a recognition of an initiative that can be a domestic initiative that deals with those sustainability practices and the international requirements? Because the international requirements may say, I only know, like if you take a big group, I'm giving you one example. In France, you've got the big chain of supermarkets that is called Carrefour. This is a very big, important supermarket chain, and they are everywhere on the world. And Carrefour has a charter of, I want to make sure that there is no child labor, that there are some sense of environmental protection in everything I purchase from my suppliers and I give to the consumers. This is their charter, but they only know the certificates that their suppliers do have at the moment. In a country like Myanmar, if there is a domestic initiative that also deals with social aspects and environmental aspects, what we need to do is to make a connection between this initiative that is from the country and the international requirements of a company like Carrefour or any other company for the sake. We at ITC, we can do that because with the standards map database, we can make the mapping of what a certain standard is and another, so that we can see the level of correspondence and we can create the trust between the buyer and the seller by telling that a sustainability standard that is locally applicable, even by a country or a region within a country, if that standard exists, and we call it a standard, but it can be a local regulation, or it can be even a private initiative from a group of enterprises that are, let's say, located in a domestic market. And that this corresponds to some of the requirements of the international buyers. So there is no limit in referencing local and domestic initiatives into the standards map so that we can push the recognition and they can be recognized across each other. Because indeed, some companies, they may not need to have the international certificate to sell domestically in their own country. No, that is not relevant. But there might be some local national standards, sustainability standards and practices or policies that are relevant for those companies. And if they are implementing those local domestic initiatives, that can be translated and transferred in a correspondence with the international markets. But you have your hand raised. You have a follow-up question, maybe.
Thank you, Mathieu. Yeah.
All good? Okay. Miguel, anything else?
No, I keep on coming back to the question or to the discussion that you've partially addressed, but it's this idea that certifications are a developed country problem. Now, that this is a concern that rich countries have, and developing countries are just like tied to these requirements, and they're just, they're having their hands twisted, their arms twisted to get these certifications just because it's this fad, it's this fashion among European consumers, but it really isn't very important. And I mention it not because I've heard it in this room, but I've heard it in other countries. I've heard it in for example, in Nigeria, where I'm currently involved in a project, saying, but all of that is just babble. All of these things about environment and Green Deal, that's just talk and nice documents that are signed in conventions, in fancy meetings. But the reality of it is, not very significant. And looking at this study that you've published in a couple of years ago, I think that clearly demonstrates this is not the case. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that idea?
Thanks, Miguel. And yes, I can elaborate a little bit on this. I mean, there are currently, who knows how many people are dying from accessing unhealthy water to drink. How many people die every year in the world because they do not access healthy, drinkable water? Are we talking about a few thousands, a few hundred thousands? Anyone has an idea? We're talking about more than 3.5 million people. Yeah. 3.5 million people die every year because they do not have access to the water. Environment is an issue. Environment needs to be protected. If we do not have any standard that helps companies realize how important it is to treat the water before putting it back into the rivers and the ocean, then you have a massive health issue and people dying from diseases related to drinking non-potable water is one example. How many people are displaced because of climate change? Talking about tens of millions of people that are displaced every year because the desert is eating the places, because of tsunamis, because of issues related to climate disasters. Climate change is an issue. And if we do not do anything about that, so yes, of course, those topics can be discussed in fancy conferences and discussions, and it's not just about the blah, blah, it's about how can we individually ourselves as citizens of the planet and also companies that work into the economic development of the countries, how can we embed better practices that it's not about only saving the trees. That's what I want to say. Climate change and water access is coming from business practices that are probably creating root cause problems that cannot be addressed in just one generation. I was just on a meeting the other day with WWF, you know, this big non-governmental organization, and they made a study about the current status of climate change. Even if we implement all the nice COP 2025, 26, and soon to come COP 27 ambitions of the countries, the climate change impacts that we have created so far will at least last for 500 years. So that means that in 500 years, if we start doing what we say we will be doing, what the governments are doing, it will take 500 years. So it's not even our grandchildren who will be seeing the solutions that we could be implementing today. It's 500 years. It is more than 20 generations. And that is not just to create some alarmist situation here, but beyond the public awareness that sustainability is important, there is the problem of having the market responding to it. And you still have a big proportion of consumers going to the supermarket and not caring so much about the products. And it's not necessarily their fault because they do not have the power to purchase something. It's too expensive to do the right things. But there is something happening. The market is changing. The policy regulations and the legislations are changing. And this is not just for the sake of being picky and annoying and inventing new trade obstacles. Of course, there is a part of that. And I'm not saying that all the sustainability initiatives are good and actually achieve and are efficient. I'm just saying that many initiatives taken by the private sector and by the public sector are trying to respond to an imminent and real situation that is a crisis. It's not about saying, hey, this is winter and I want to have strawberries. It's about, hey, we have a planet, we need to protect it. And this goes together with the social aspects and every human being that lives on the planet and that also deserves to have, you know, good practices when it comes to having a living wage and some livelihoods that are decent working conditions, decent family, being able to have children and bring them to school. So that's a little bit more like philosophical, but I just wanted to say this because sometimes sustainability is seen as being a new problem invented by the rich people to annoy and create even more obstacles to the poor countries. And this is not necessarily 100% the case. It might not be totally wrong, but this is not the intention. We need to have one step back and look at the full picture. You have social challenges in France, in Germany, in Belgium, even in Switzerland. Switzerland is a very rich country, but you also have here big problems. Just last week, and I'll stop with that anecdote. Just last week, in the newspapers in Switzerland, you had one guy who was caught by the police. He had migrant workers build his big house by the lake, a fantastic big house, multi-million dollars. And he had migrant workers without any contract, without any protection, without any salary. It was almost like slavery work that exists even here in Switzerland. Good thing, the police caught him. He will probably never live in his palace that fronts the lake, multi-million with a swimming pool. He will not live there because he was using slavery work in poor conditions. But if that happens in Switzerland, that happens everywhere on the planet as well. And it's not just about imposing those labor and social standards in exporters of mangoes from Africa and exporters of pepper from Asia. It's about making sure that every human being and migrants are also treated in a decent way. So again, that's maybe a sidetrack to the conversation. I'm happy to go back into the conversation about what does that really mean and implications for especially the private sector, because this is what we are talking about today. It's not about, necessarily changing the minds of the consumers and I mean, some people, they change very slowly, but the private sector is the sector that changes the quickest. It is the sector that has innovation, that has actually the power of making the planet a better world for everyone. And for the private sector, there are the sustainability standards. And here is standards map. So if that's okay with you, I'll take the next 15 minutes to show you the platform, how it works. And then we can, of course, come back to the conversation. So I will just quickly stop the sharing of this presentation, and I will open the website that is the standardsmap.org website. So here I have it on my screen. You should be seeing it.
We are. Yes, thank you.
You are. Okay, good. Very good. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. So Standards Map, it's accessible, standardsmap.org. So the website is simple to access. You just type in your internet browser, standardsmap.org, and then you reach to this homepage that explains again a little bit what we have here in terms of modules to identify standards that are relevant to you, making the comparisons so that you can say, okay, in this sector for these companies, there are 5, 10, 15 standards. Maybe not all of them are relevant. So how can you compare and see the easiest ones or the less costly or the more relevant? So doing some comparisons, monitoring some trends, and this is important as well, the trends of the markets. I mean, I'll show you how to extract similar information as I showed in my slides. And then the self-assessment that is just for companies to do a quick diagnostic about where they are in terms of sustainability. So that's the homepage, a few partners that we work with. But again, let's dive into the more crispy, interesting things. So Explore Standards Map, that is the green button that you see on the top of the page. Once you hit the button, you enter the main search of the application, and you have a menu of filters that is here on the left-hand side. And then in the middle, you have the whole list of standards that are linked, that are ranked alphabetically from A to Z. And currently you can see we have 319 standards that are referenced. As I told you before, all of them work with us and our team to update and maintain their information so that we are sure that the data we have is accurate and up to date. The searches are also made as user-friendly as possible. So in the search, you can type any name. So if you know a certain standard that you'd like to look at, you can actually type fair, for instance. And if you type fair, you see I have a list of all the standards that include fair. from Fair Labor Association, Fair Stone, Fair Trade Tourism, or USA, or Fair Wage, or Fair for Life, Fair Wild. So you see, this is a search by keyword. Only if you would like to, if you already know something about the name of a standard that you'd like to look for. Then you have the possibility to filter by sustainability themes. And this is where you have human rights, labor rights, due diligence, etc., or by pillar. If you click pillar or theme, you see you have the list below that changes. The sustainability pillars are, let's say, the big categories we have in the database. We have environment, social, management and ethics, and then quality. Those are the big pillars that we have categorized in order to look at what the standards are all about. The themes are more like, you know, a theme, you can find a way to regroup topics together, like human rights or due diligence, and then environment and climate change, or the gender as a specific lens, or quality, sustainable business, food safety. So my recommendation for you, when you start looking at the database, you first select the pillars, because this is very clear. It is social or environment, management, ethics, quality. And here you can also search for specific components to the pillars. So in the environment, you can, for instance, select standards or initiatives that are linked to biodiversity. So you see here, I click biodiversity, and automatically the list of the standards has updated. You see, every time you change a filter, you have the corresponding standards that will be displayed on the screen. So 227 cover biodiversity out of the 300 that we had in the beginning, because some of them only focus on other topics. You can make multiple filters. So you could say biodiversity and climate and waste and soil. You see, the more filters you put, the narrower is the list of the standards. So the more you put, now we have only 124 standards that are referenced, because I selected soil, biodiversity, waste, and climate. So I want to only look at those standards that cover all these topics. That's for environment, but obviously you have the same logic under social. So you could see, I also would like those initiatives that focus on human rights. And you see the list continues to go down the more I select, or labor rights. And then same goes for management and ethics, or for quality, in case you'd like to look at quality components as well. This is for the filtering of initiatives per themes or pillars. But below that, you can also select per sector and per country. So sector could be agriculture, or culture, or more. So those are the big sectors that we have: education, energy, floriculture, fisheries, finance, livestock. Again, here it depends where you start from your search. I was selecting biodiversity, waste, and water, but those filters, they can apply to any sector. So maybe I will restrict to agriculture, and you see here I'm dropping to 59 standards. 59 standards that are agriculture and all my environmental filters before. That's for the sector, but the products could also be actually selected in particular. So the sector could be, the product in itself could be even selected at the product level. So cocoa and coffee as an example. And you see again, if I select those two products, I do have now only 30 standards in my list, but that's fine. I'm just showing you how the search works. Country of origin, country of destination. This could be from origin could be from the whole region, Asia, Europe, Africa, or you could also look at more for a specific country name. So you can also select the country. Here I only selected Africa, Asia. Destination is the destination market. Again, I'm showing you all the filters, but you don't need to use all of them. It's only an example. Okay, so here, for instance, if I select as a destination Europe, That means I'm looking at the trade flow from Asia to Europe with all the parameters, biodiversity, waste, human rights, and also agriculture, coffee, and cocoa. So the more I put here, the more I have selected. And now here, with all my filters, I have 14 standards out of 319. All of them are right here for me to review. Very quickly on the last filters, they are a bit less used, but at least for you to know what this is. You can also select standards that are for the primary production or the manufacturing or distribution only. You can look at standards that focus on particular SDGs, and this is mostly for policy makers to look at. The typology of standards, if it's a private or public or an international standard. If the standard is for accreditation, verification, benchmarking, etc. If the verification is with a third-party certification, or if it's not the case. So that is sometimes important when you look at the credibility of the claim. Recognitions and benchmarking, that is a filter if there are international organizations that have recognized the standard already as being a good one, but this is very much anecdotal. And then the question as well, some people may ask if yes or no, there is a label on the product. So I could select in this yes. And if I select yes, I'm only with 3 standards left for all my filters, hand in hand, Rapunzel Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance, WFTO guarantee system. What happens here, and maybe I will just expand the list a little bit bigger. What happens when you have a list of standards that correspond to your search? Well, there are a few things that you can do. You can look at some elements of the standards. So when you click see more, like EcoVadis or hand in hand, you see more and you have a graphic that shows you the proportion of the pillars from environmental, social, management, ethics, and quality. So hand in hand, this label is, as you can see, most of it is orange. That means more than 50% of the scope is with social issues. And there is a quarter of the scope of the standard for environment. And the green part here is for management, ethics, and a little bit about quality. And you can compare it with Rainforest Alliance by just looking here. Rainforest Alliance, they have 2 big parts, the orange and the pink, and that's social environment, okay? And they are more or less the same size. So just by clicking at this button here that says sees more, in the list, you have a little bit of a at a glance idea what the standard is about. You can go into a more detailed profile by clicking here on the profile. And this opens up a page where you have a lot of information about this label. It's about the overview of the standard. It gives you an information about what it is, what it covers, the label and purpose, typology, sectors. You can also see on a map where the standard operates. You click on see on the map and you would see that directly, some figures. And then you also have from the menu above a possibility to look at their requirements, also opening up all the requirements one after the other. So this is a deep dive into the standard itself, all the criteria for soil, all the criteria for biodiversity. So you can really investigate this standard very quickly, or you just go back to the identify and look at the list that you had put together. So I don't know why my list was not updated with this. So "56 standards. It looks like my filters are not kept when I go for this, but that's okay, fine. Continue with this. So from the list of standards that you have selected, let's see, for instance, here I would see European Union organic standard. You can also, beyond looking at the profile of the initiative and their requirements, and also looking how they comply, the governance and the resources to dive and learn more about it. The key point is about comparing the standards across each other. So for instance, you could select the standard for the comparison. So this is the button that you can see here in your command of action, compare. If you click compare, it goes to your basket for comparisons. Fair trade, for instance, I can take it as well. I could also go to another page and look at the IFOAM and any standard really that is in your list, you can take it, the new Rainforest Alliance. And once you have selected them for comparisons, then you can click, you see on the top navigation bar, compare button. And this will show you the standards as you have selected them, starting with a graphic visualization. So you can see what is the scope of one across another. What do you see instantly in this graphic? You can see that the European Union organic standard is mostly focused on environmental topics. Comercio Justo Fair Trade covers both environmental and social issues, and the organic standard IFOAM is a little bit more on social. This is what you can see from those graphics when you bring them together on the same page. But there is a possibility to switch to a more detailed table in advance. And this is where all the standards will be mapped next to each other with the possibility to actually look at what do they cover side by side. So you see here, for instance, we have all the soil criteria, and you can see yes or no. If a standard covers a topic like soil contamination is part of the organic standard of the EU, the IFOAM, but it is not covered by fair trade. Same goes with the Rainforest Alliance. So you can move the table and go down and search all these investigations. Environment, social issues as well. You have the possibility to look at all the human rights related criteria, and you see what is covered and what is not covered, standard per standard. The importance of these tables is that you can easily grasp which are the standards that have the most criteria, the most relevant informant criteria for compliance, and which are the ones that are not covered. For instance, here, criteria on the quality of the products, packaging, and transportation is covered by all the three, and then you do not have the other criteria covered. So at least for a company, it is important to be able to access this and to realize if they would like to become certified against fair trade, what they need to do. The table that we have here, we can always go back to the chart and review the standards next to each other in a graphic way, in a visualization way. This possibility here enables the users to then navigate and see the differences. Obviously, you can at any time just come back to the identify module here, clear all the filters, start back with the 319 standards and do another search. Okay, so another search where you would be also looking at maybe some filters of the human rights in a certain product category like bananas, and selecting new criteria. One thing that could be interesting for you as well is those Biotrade UNCTAD principles that we have referenced in the standards map database here, and they could be also looked at in comparison with any other standard that we have. So let me show you that. After selecting a few in the compare module, if I go back to compare, then I will show how these represent. So you see here, I have the UNCTAD Biotrade principles criteria, and they can be shown against CISA, the South African standard, or the ARSO sustainability and eco-labeling. And the same goes from a visual perspective. You can switch to a table and look at those one after the other. What do they cover? What do they not cover? I hope that this is clear as a comparison of the standards. So the main two modules really of the standards map are the identify. This is the search, where you identify the standards based on a certain number of parameters and criteria. And then the comparison table. And the comparison is where you put them side by side and you look at the issues that are covered and the ones that are not covered by the different standards. An important module that I have not yet shown is this Megatrends. So in the menu on the top bar, you have the trends module. And if you click on this, it will open up a database of volumes of certified products and the analysis that we have done for not all the sectors, but many sectors and many countries. So you click on the trends of the sustainable markets, and then you see the navigation is slightly different. It looks per country and per commodity. So you can always start your search one way or another. So for instance, in this case, if you click by commodity, you will see the trends of certification and sustainability standards per certain product. So I can select, for instance, cocoa, and by cocoa, you will see here in a map and also in tables, what are the different trends. So which are the countries that have the most certified products, like in this case, Ivory Coast or Ghana and Nigeria. You can see also the trends and how this has evolved over time in terms of the harvested area and the volumes, and then the different labels that exist in this sector. So fair trade, organic, Rainforest Alliance, UTZ. You can also look at the different countries that have the largest certified areas. But then you can switch to another country or another commodity. In this case, for instance, soybean. Select soybean, and automatically you have the same information generated. So for instance, this case here would be Brazil, China, Argentina, India, the world map where you have all the different components. And then you can also look at the other trends below, where you can see which are the different standards that have certified the product. There is a possibility as well to look at the market data of particular standards and labels. So we do not have all of them here, but for instance, Bonsucro, Fair Trade, all of those that you see on the screen, you can also make a search and you take access directly to their own information. So if you select Fair Trade, then you will see, again, in the same format, first on a world map, where do they operate in particular? What are the top countries that have fair trade certified products? And then you're moving down, you can also look at the different trends of the certified areas year by year. The countries, top countries certified, the top products as well that they certify as well. So banana, cocoa, cotton, sugarcane. And if you look at one particular product, then you will be able to look at the commodity, the harvested areas, and the percentages of changes. So this module of the trends is very relevant when you want to make some market analysis of potential of exports and also choosing a standard for helping those market access conditions. It can be used for market analysis. And again, as I was saying, we do not cover all the sectors and all the countries in terms of this market data, just because we have only information from a number of standards and they do not cover all the sectors and all the countries. But what we have, we put it here so that you can also see the latest information that we have been able to collect. And it still corresponds to a big majority of the sustainable trade market analysis. The self-assessment tool is something that is being currently relaunched by our team. So at the moment, when you click on this, you cannot yet do a self-assessment, but the idea, and it will be coming by the summer of this year, is very similar to starting from an identification of relevant standards. And then you say, for instance, that you would like to get a self-assessment done against one of the standards. So you would select the one that is of your interest in the list, and then you run a self-assessment, so answering questions, so that all the criterions that we have in the standard, you can say yes or no, are you doing the right thing? So you have a diagnostic of where technical assistance can be needed, where ITC can help you. I would say,
Matthew, sorry, let me interrupt you on there, because we had Anna Battaloni on Monday present to us a self-assessment tool. Is that same tool here?
The one that she presented is customized for the Biotrade. So okay. It is not the same, because in this one here, what we have is self-assessment against every standard that we have in the standards map database. The self-assessment that Anna Battaglione showed is a customized version of it, just for the Biotrade and the UNCTAD principles that have been released. So it is shorter, but it is more targeted for Biotrade in particular. In this case here, you would have, for instance, a textile company as much as a cocoa or a coffee farmer that can actually do a self-assessment against any of the 300 standards we have. But it is more generic. And anyway, at the moment, it doesn't work. I mean, we're launching it in the summer. But the one that Anna shown is already working. And so that was basically what I wanted to end you with in terms of the standards map. So really reminding that there are those three major pillars that you can use: the identification of the standards, the comparison of their own requirements step by step and side by side, understanding what they cover, what they do not cover, and then the monitoring of market trends for a selected number of standards and a selected number of commodities and products. So I hope that this has been useful. And again, I'm very happy to answer any additional question about how the standards map can be used. One thing that is not, of course, visible online here, but I hope that you have understood as well, is that ITC on our side, we are more than happy to help you use the tool, but also do additional offline analysis of standards. So if there are some particular sustainability initiatives or local regulations, legislations that exist in other countries that are not on the standards map, you can ask me and my team to make analysis and comparisons so that there are better correspondences with the international standards that we have on the standards map website. Sustainability, it is there and it is there to stay, and it has an implication on international trade at multiple levels. So it's important to get aware and get to learn about this as much as it's possible. So Miguel, I'd like to give you back the floor and maybe have a little discussion with the participants about it. And obviously I'll be sharing with you the slides, so you can also share with the participants the materials, and as well as my contact details if they have any further questions, of course.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I see that people are interested and have been engaged in the conversation, but now it is time for everyone's questions and comments to come up. As you have seen, this is the space, and Matthew is really happy to answer even uncomfortable questions like the one I asked. So please don't hesitate. Just share with us what you're thinking.
It may also not be very obvious right now after just the demo of the site, but I really encourage everyone to be to take some time, maybe today already, not waiting too long, just going directly on the standardsmap.org website, making a few of those filter selections to see how it works and come up with any kind of, if there is any question, if something is becoming a bit weird to you, don't wait too long before coming back to us, because this is where I'm more than happy to help you. I'm maybe just going to put it on the slide on the chat box as well, so that you just click on it and just navigate a little bit the site. We had a good conversation before the demo as well about, you know, the relevance of sustainability and standards and market access, domestic market versus international markets. Again, I can't say it enough, but the market is changing, and the legislations in Europe, in US, in everywhere is also changing quite rapidly. So we need to get our private sector ready, and the enterprises that work with you need also to be as much prepared as possible to implement the good practices that will help in the end everyone. I see there is a hand raised.
Yes, Tip, please go ahead.
Yes, it's for me. I'm just thinking of in practice as a service provider, when we have clients coming in, and usually the starting point would be, rather than look into what kind of standards that my products, for example, banana, that should meet in order to export to European market, for example, rather than that, usually the starting point would be the requirement from the importing countries and saying, okay, you have to meet that fair trade and blah, blah, blah. And we starting from given standards there, and then we look through from there. So what's exactly a requirement of that standards? But here I see that we don't start from that, but we start from what are the standards in terms of climate change, or you mentioned about go to the filters and then select it, that one. So for me, I couldn't figure out which assessment, which toolkit should start, which one is appropriate for what, you know what I mean?
Of course. And I think, thanks for the question. There are different starting points. And it is true that the companies, when they are in a business relationship with a buyer, they will have to respond to the requirements of the buyers, and the buyers will many often will say what they want, what kind of product they want, when they want it, and what's the quality, etc. Sometimes the buyers will be as specific as telling which is the sustainability standard or the label that they would like to have. But in some cases, the buyers will give some flexibility in terms of sustainability claims, saying, I want to make sure that my suppliers, like in my example with the big supermarket Carrefour, they have a charter that is a strategy that is quite vague. They want to make sure there is good work done on social and on environment, and the supplier needs to demonstrate that they are doing the right thing. But Carrefour is not imposing this or that label. They say, show me a label, whatever, so long as it covers social or environment. And this is where the suppliers, the exporters, they need to understand what options they have. And so this is why, in this sense, the standards map helps by starting saying, what can I select as a label that I will show to my buyer? And this is where it starts from this selection of, I am based in this country, I would like to export to that country. So here is a list of labels, and I would like some labels that work on both social and environment, or maybe just on environment. And so you have you have a list that becomes more and more precise. And then once you have it, then you can start certification, assessment. And this is where we were saying maybe a self-assessment, just to understand how difficult it is to become certified. So before paying, you would just make a self-assessment that is free of charge on Standards Map as from this summer, and then you start implementing your change. But you see the starting point can be, it's easier if the company tells you, I want this label, good luck. But we want to give some solutions, alternatives that would tell what are the possibilities that people can have.
And maybe I can complement here Matthew's point by saying that sometimes buyers will say, look, I want you to have fair trade or fair wild or whatever certification. And it just so happens that the company already has another certification. So using Standards Map can help them and can help the company say to their buyer, look, I already have this one, and according to this UN-based tool, I'm actually matching or actually exceeding some of the requirements of that certification you want me to have. So I'm actually not bad, even if I don't have that certification you want me to have, because I already have this other one, right? And that is the principle of equivalence, and that is absolutely crucial, because as anybody that has undergone a certification process will show and will tell, it's costly. Yes, of course, the implementation of any management system is a major cost. And then it's a bit, marginally less with new certifications, with each of the new ones. But you still have to pay for the audit, and you still have to pay for the certification rights. And you still have to pay every year or 2 years or 3 years to become recertified, re-audited, and all of that is expensive. So if you can save some of that money by demonstrating that the stuff you have in place is as good as or better than what is being required of you, then you can save money, save time, and actually, be in a really good position vis-a-vis your buyer. Okay, Nansu has asked a question. It says, thank you very much for interesting presentation and detailed explanation. Will ITC or you give the presentation about VSS more detail? I mean, how to do data analysis for break-even point analysis and other standards?
So yes, I mean, the presentation will be shared with everyone, and the more details, I mean, all the details you can see on the Standards Map website, up to the granular level of the requirements of the standards, what they ask, what they don't cover, what they really have as a complementary to each other. All of that is available directly online on the Standards Map. If you would like to make more data analysis and comparisons of standards in an offline system, I'm thinking about Excel as an example, that would need to come from a direct request to ITC. Myself and my team, we can do that. We can prepare some detailed data analysis that you can run offline as well in Excel. But yes, the presentation the presentation itself, you will have it. You will have the presentation, that is no problem. And if you'd like to make, I'm not sure about break-even point analysis in itself, what is meant by that, but if it's about looking at if a standard fulfills the requirements of another standard, like those kind of compatibility issues, this is something you can do both the online and also offline in Excel, if you would be interested.
Also, maybe I think I understand what Nansu is saying, and Nansu, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you're saying is you would also like to have an understanding of how to evaluate whether it makes sense from a financial standpoint for a company to embark upon any certification, and how do you demonstrate what's the break-even point between the investment in the certification process and the revenue obtained because of having it.
This question of break-even point in terms of investment and costs is something where ITC can help, but this would be mostly ad hoc with you, looking at some particular cases and scenarios of standards, because obviously every situation will be different. the investments and the costs are more or less standardized in terms of, as an example, so many, I mean, like $2,000 per certificate for a certain crop for a certain year. But $2,000, if you want to make sure that you recuperate this investment with returns on the market, then we need to make additional market data for looking at the price difference that you can have thanks to the certificate. And this is very different per sector, per product, and per type of company. So I would say this requires additional coaching, and there is a possibility for ITC to do coaching of enterprises and also of support organizations so that we can help you train on this. But there is no easy answer to this break-even calculation. But there are some identifications that we can do and help. So a company profile, you're putting it in addition in the chat. The company profile, the financial access are parameters that we can evaluate in comparison with the standard and the cost of the certification. We can do that, but this is something that requires additional, let's say, services and coaching to make sure that the market pitch, the finance credit is adapted as well to what is requested. One point to reiterate as well, the investment into a standard is not only the certification cost, it is also everything that helps the standard to improve, the company to improve until it is compliant to the standard. And that investment has to take part of the break-even analysis, because let's say if you take a company that would like to get certified against a standard, it is not just a matter of picking up the phone, having an auditor, paying the invoice, and having the certificate. Maybe there are things you need to invest, and this very much depends per company. It's not standardized at all. Some companies have to invest massively in some warehouses for chemicals and separate from non-chemicals type inputs or entrants or seeds. When it comes to social protection and health at work, maybe you need to also change a few things, and that can be very costly, a lot more than the certificate.
Thank you, Matthew. I was about to say that, yes, that's what I was trying to say before is that all the processes and all the changes and all the things that the company has to put in place so that it can be actually compatible, that its practices, its processes, its operation is compatible with the standard. That is the implementation of the standard. The audit is, in a way, the easy bit. This is the substantive and more difficult and probably more expensive bit. There's another question. Adichie is on the chat saying that businesses tend to find using standards for sustainable measures to be more cumbersome in terms of having these goals measures as the duty of a business for the sake of society. Instead, they want to do this just to do business with other businesses or governments outside their own country. How do you show businesses the importance of having ESG embedded in their operations?
It is a very good question. It is not easy. And obviously, sometimes there is always the question about the carrot and the stick. The carrot is that if they implement ESG, they have a chance of having better prices on the market, domestic and international, mostly international indeed, but potentially as well on the domestic market. That is the carrot. And the stick is when there is a legislation that is actually pushing for that, and that otherwise you would have some sort of sanction or less ability to do your business. So that this is the most, let's say, the most revealing communication that can go with the businesses about the importance of having it, not just for the sake of the society, not just for the sake of preserving the environment, because we know that in the end of the day, the importance is also for the companies to survive. And surviving means selling their products with the most priority thing that is for having some revenues. The additional sustainability comes only second priority, unless there is a market demand, higher prices, or also some sanctions or market regulations that would actually kick you out if you don't do your business in the right way. So this is how we basically show the business. I mean, we show the business the importance as well by looking at the market trends. You know, what I was showing you in the beginning, that the trend is like the market is only growing in that direction. So if that market grows, that means the normal, non-standard, non-ESG market is going down. So that means it's becoming less and less easy to be competitive in the traditional market. You can improve your competitiveness in a growing market. And this is a language that businesses will understand. They will understand that in order to boost their competitiveness, they also need to embed ESG into their operations. And I think that language of competitiveness is actually even more important than just do the sustainable standards for, you know, saving the planet somehow. Some people don't care. But the thing is, for their businesses to thrive in the medium and long term, ESG needs to be part of their operations. And more companies understand that. This is why the market is showing so much of a transformation over the last 10 and 15 years.
And if I may complement that answer by Matthew with an anecdote, anecdotal evidence. I used to work for the Fresh Cut Flour Exporters Association of Colombia, long time ago, 20 years ago. And back when I started working with them in 98, there was a lot of concern by flour growers in Colombia, big exporters, mind you, all of them exporting above 5 to 10 million US dollars, some of them exporting even up to 50 or 60 million dollars, individual companies. So fairly large companies, you know, making lots of money. And many of them saying, why do we need to care about the environment? Why do you come and bug me with not, for example, not burning tires to keep the temperature up in the nights when it's very cold and I need to keep my roses from wilting or dying because of frost? And it was very difficult to convince them that actually environmental management or environmentally sustainable management of their farms, of their plantations, made sense. And the way to do it was by showing them how the costs associated with the use of risky and dangerous synthetic pesticides and agrochemicals versus the use of organic or natural agrochemicals was actually higher, even if the price was lower to begin with, but through all the expenses added in terms of protection equipment for workers and potential illnesses and all these other things that go with the application of dangerous chemicals was actually positive. In other words, putting in dangerous chemicals on the flowers and on the ground, on the soil, was more costly on the long run, even if the price of the input is lower at the moment you pay it. So what I'm trying to say is, when you help companies understand that what Matthew is saying is absolutely right. Yes, there is a market demand. Yes, there are trends towards being certified or being organic or being sustainable as a critical component. Also being sustainable from a business perspective, if you consider not the 6 months or 1 year, but maybe 5 to 10 year perspective, actually makes a lot more sense financially and commercially, right? So it's interesting to consider thinking with companies about that side of the equation. How does it affect your own production costs? So again, to keep on just illustrating the conversation or the point, I mentioned I'm working in Nigeria on a ginger, and I was having a conversation with one producer, and I was saying, but why are you so resistant to certifying yourself organic? Don't you think that looking after the soil is important? He said, hell yes, I need to take care of my soil, because now I am already having productivity issues. Now my yields are low because I have used too many chemicals and now soil is poor. I need to enrich that soil. So taking care of the soil is a main concern. So why don't you start using organic as opposed to synthetic chemicals, and try to consider using the soil not as one thing to not as a consequence of addressing one problem with one pest, but maybe consider the entire process of managing your production cycle holistically, and understanding that there are things that you can do that may be slightly more expensive upfront, but will bring added benefits on the medium to long term and on savings in another side of the production cycle. I don't know if we have addressed your questions, Aditi.
Yes, that was really well addressed. Thank you.
Pleasure. Anybody else has any thoughts? As you see, this is just about having a conversation around sustainability and the costs and benefits of being or having sustainable production and commercialization processes and how to demonstrate them. What has been your experience in the different countries?
Okay.
Yes.
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps and quite similar to your cases, talking about the investment on, it would be extra cost for the producer, especially those who may not really aware of the consequences of using a lot of chemical and things. But what I'm thinking, what's lacking is more and more accessible document evidence and case studies for those who may really actively involved in this kind of not a good practices. They may not aware of the consequences, in a longer, medium and longer term, and also the benefit, cost and benefit, in a longer term. So for them, those people who own vast of land and they contribute the labors and they just work according to the what is called investor, who put money in, and it's a pity. It's really a case of Laos, especially in the north, in the far north, the banana plantations, right? Puts a lot of chemicals, and we see it. Witness myself, people coming back from the farm and saying that, okay, I got this and that disease because of use too much chemicals, but they cannot do anything. They just make for a living and have to bear that cost. And I think it's education. It would be very important for them.
Absolutely. And if I will have to say something that very few other people will say, but there is a negative incentive in many associations that work, or many organizations that work with agricultural producers, to not speak highly of agrochemicals, of synthetic agrochemicals, because the big laboratories that produce these synthetic agrochemicals, they use a lot of money for marketing purposes to support activities that either governments or associations conduct. So there is a very difficult incentive there to not really discuss the reduction in the use of synthetic agrochemicals, whereas I think the evidence points very clearly to the fact that using synthetic agrochemicals is normally not a great idea for the long run. And indeed, in the long run, it doesn't actually increase yields as much as it might do in the very short run. For this harvest, it could be very effective. 5 years down the line, not obvious. I was reading a report on productivity promotion by the Gates Foundation in Africa. They have been doing for the past 10 years heavy investments on using this green revolution concept of using heavy machinery, heavy agrochemical use to increase yields, and 10 years down the line, inconclusive results, which is a way of saying doesn't work. So you also need to bear in mind that there is an industry that sells these agrochemicals that wants to sell them. Therefore, there will be a continuous push to sell these things, and producers need to have a nuanced, more balanced way to understand the costs and benefits of using sustainability approaches versus not using them. Okay, I hope I wasn't overly polemic on with these comments.
No, I think you said something very, very relevant. And also the thing is that for these usage of chemicals, you also have the problem that the more you put, the more you need to put. And the soil, in your example of ginger, the more chemicals you put into the soil, the less fertile and productive it is by itself. And so the next year you need to put even more chemicals, and then even more and even more. And that actually has a vicious circle, whereas what sustainability practices tend to offer is a possibility to break that vicious circle and bring it to a virtuous circle where maybe not from one day to another you have zero chemical, but you start re-enriching the soil and the productivity of the whole production that the companies have, by implementing step-by-step different approaches that, make it all work much better, having crop rotations, having some no tillage of some of the parcels and the land at the same time as enabling some biodiversity to get back into the production area. I mean, all of that is really, actually, sometimes it's not that the farmers or the producers do not want, it's that they do not know that it works. And by raising awareness and giving those tips, sometimes it is actually helping them a lot more than they would expect, because otherwise they would see, hey, my work is currently working fine, why should I change? Well, because maybe if you change a little bit, it's going to be even more than fine. But that, again, it depends, again, on the crop, on the standard, on the label. And it's a lot of raising awareness and education. And hopefully the resource that you've discovered today on the standards map is a resource that you can use to facilitate awareness raising on the sustainability practices, the standards, their requirements, the practices that you can read very much at every criteria, soil productivity, what it means that one step. So all of that is, no problem. All of that to say that there is a lot to learn, and it's a journey, it takes time. So thanks. And back to you, Miguel.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I think Zor has a comment, or if anybody else has anything else to say, please just go ahead.
Yeah. So in our country, it's a some of the place, and same with the Laos, like a banana issue. And on the other hand, the tea farming area, some of the farmers region and the southern sensitive, and some of the township, is luckily they are very poor. They cannot afford to buy the agrochemical. So that's why that region is now a all virgin land and produce the natural product and easily to do the organic. And now exported to the US market. That is one of the such case, the story for our country. Some of the places they are using a lot the chemical for the tea farm, because of their labor charges is quite high. So their farming is a very big one, and so other time they are using some pesticide. So there is a problem for the chemical residue in the tea leaf. So that kind of situation we saw in our region. So finally, the advisor, the agree consultants and certification body, and they are not applying and do the neutrally or not apply the organic, and they are using the aggregate, they need to wait 3 years. 3 years they are land and need to be take time, 3 years. So we hope we have many practical experience. So that's why that is sustainability agreement is a very important. So I will recommend that. Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation and training for today.
Thank you, Zol. Yeah, indeed, I cannot agree more with you. I mean, we've been to trade shows together. We've seen the reaction of buyers. But then again, I want to highlight, and my point has been to try and highlight that, yes, there is a market dimension that is undeniable, and that is what Matthew has shown us very clearly. There is a market dimension towards a bigger drive towards sustainability, and that's unavoidable. And that's not only, the rich Germans and rich French, and it is spreading all over. The US is very heavily into this. Japan is very heavily into this. South Korea is getting into it. Everybody, yes, the more developed countries are more into it, but it's catching on very, very quickly. So it's a market dimension, but there's also a production dimension that is very important. Adichie, please come in.
Yes, so when businesses see that the market is going towards sustainable products, they might try to have activities to show that they're doing some green activities for marketing purposes mostly. And you see this a lot in the developed countries, right? So do these standards and these stick approach help businesses avoid greenwashing practices?
Great question. Matthew?
Well, greenwashing practices, unfortunately, are all over the place, and the problem with that is the lack of trust that it creates on the market between players and stakeholders that are in the global value chains. Greenwashing still needs to be sometimes taken with caution, because there is really the false claims, something which is totally wrong and that is absolutely just marketing. And although this would be easier to do like 10 or 15 years ago when everything was totally confused, I mean, right now, the markets and the regulators are very much more looking into the detail of it. So when you have a sustainability claim, you better have a good traceability and a proof that all your actions were done correctly. So greenwashing is still happening now, but with all the frameworks, the regulatory, the traceability, the chain of custody frameworks that exist, it is probably less likely to be successful. In a very short term, you may fool your buyers and your customers and your regulators, but in the medium and long term, greenwashing is not an option. So what we can see is that in the landscape of sustainability standards, those that were mostly marketing, not very robust, not having a lot of guarantees, they are either being dismissed, or they disappear, or they are being merged with others and taken away. So the market is also cleaning up its own mess, so to speak, a bit like, the evolution theory. If you're not good enough, you will be disappearing sooner or later from the market. So I recommend also, when you search for labels on the standards map, that you look at the governance aspects of the standards, which shows the level of seriousness that the standard and the label has put into putting together their certification mechanism. If you see something like a label that says the verification will be done once every 10 years, be sure this is greenwashing. It's stupid. If there is no verification, then even worse. If there is just very ad hoc sampling of the products to check the compatibility, again, this is not credible. So governance aspects are very much an important indicator of the seriousness of initiatives, and hence the greenwashing itself.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. I completely agree with you. And if you look at what has been happening lately in the past couple of months, there has been quite a lot of discussion in the financial markets around green investments, because there's a lot of fund managers and investors wanting to invest in green initiatives, in new energies and renewables and all these things. And it has been found, precisely because these standards exist and these traceability measures exist, that a lot of those green investment funds are actually just greenwashing. They're basically just babble, trying to fool people into putting money into these funds that charge higher commissions, but don't invest in the really new green initiatives, but just a slightly modified version of the same things. And they end up, funding tobacco and oil companies and these things instead of funding, solar initiatives or new forms of energy generation, etc. So I guess I only want to highlight the fact that indeed it is increasingly difficult to just greenwash and yeah, that's it, it's good enough. There's increasingly less things that can remain hidden under the sun in this space. Having said that, I noticed that we have gone over our allocated 2 hours, and I think that it's about time to wrap up. Before I wrap up, I have left in the chat box 3 times the link to the evaluation survey. It's very, very, very simple. It's a few clicks and a few words. So please do take 2.5, 3 minutes to complete this survey. It will help us tremendously. Let me take the opportunity to thank Matthew, because I think that he has provided us with not only a lot of knowledge and insights into the tool and the work of ITC, but also really interesting, stimulating conversation around the general topic of sustainability and what it means for companies and for us as BSOs. And as has been now customary, I will kindly ask you to put your cameras on for 2 minutes while I take a small picture to capture the moment, just to say that we've been here and we have enjoyed our time. Okay, great stuff. Excellent. Thank you all. Now a big smile, say cheese. Say cheese again. Okay, yes, that's it. Great stuff. Thank you very much, people. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much, Matthew. I think it's been a very interesting and very lively discussion, and I hope we all are taking quite a lot away with us. Thank you all.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope we keep in touch. Don't hesitate. I'll send you the slides, Miguel, and you can share that with everyone.
Will do. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
See you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Happy birthday, Matthew.
Thank you. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.